On the edge of the galaxy, in a dusty corner of space, there was a small, unremarkable town named Lander's Edge. Its people were used to the quiet rhythm of life, dust storms in the summer, long nights under an empty sky, and a sense of isolation that was as constant as the stars above. Life on this planet, a forgotten speck in the universe, was simple but hard, with most residents working the mines or tending to their small farms. Then one evening, everything changed. It started with a flash, bright enough to light up the entire night sky. The whole town stopped what they were doing, gazing upwards. At first, people thought it was just another meteor shower. But the flash grew, pulsing and shifting in strange patterns, like a cosmic heartbeat. The light moved across the sky in a way that no meteor could, and then, with a soft hum, it descended. In a matter of moments, a massive ship appeared, hovering above the town. It wasn't like anything anyone had ever seen. The ship gleamed silver and blue, with shapes that seemed to ripple, like liquid metal caught in mid-motion. The air hummed with an unfamiliar energy, and the ship's surface seemed to shimmer and shift, giving it the appearance of something not entirely solid. The people of Lander's Edge stood frozen, staring at the ship with wide eyes, a mixture of awe and fear gripping their hearts. Was this a dream, a trick, or something far more real, and far more terrifying? And then, the ship opened. A large bay door slid open with a soft mechanical whir, revealing figures stepping into view. They weren't human, but they were not monstrous either. They were tall and elegant, their bodies covered in gleaming, iridescent suits that glowed faintly in the light of their ship. Their faces were smooth and angular, with large eyes that seemed to shimmer with a deep understanding, as if they could see straight into the soul. They looked friendly. Their movement was graceful, unhurried, as if they had all the time in the universe. A voice echoed in the minds of the people, a calm, melodic tone that seemed to resonate with the air itself. People of Lander's Edge, we come in peace. We are the Zilathians, and we bring an offer, an invitation to join the Galactic Federation. The words hung in the air for a long moment, their meaning slowly sinking in. A Galactic Federation, an alliance of worlds, they said. The words were not lost on the people of Lander's Edge. Some of them felt an overwhelming surge of excitement, while others felt a deep chill of distrust. This was no ordinary encounter. This was the beginning of something far greater than any of them could have imagined. As the first group of Zilathians stepped down from their ship, a few brave souls from the town approached them, cautiously but curiously. They had always dreamed of something greater, something beyond the dust and isolation of Lander's Edge. Could it be that the stars, those distant pinpricks of light, were now within reach? But not everyone in town shared the same sentiment. At the far end of the square, a group of men and women gathered, whispering in hushed tones. They had seen the news, heard the stories of strange alien encounters, and felt the stirrings of doubt. Were these beings truly peaceful, or was there something more sinister at play? Among them was Jacob Blackthorne, a grizzled miner with a deep suspicion of anything he didn't understand. He had grown up on the fringes of society, where the only rule was survival. He had no desire to be part of some galactic alliance. He didn't trust the Zilathians, didn't want their shiny promises or their strange technologies. He just wanted to keep his land, his family, and his way of life intact. We don't know what they want, Jacob muttered to the others. If they've got all this power, why come here? Why us? The others nodded in agreement, their faces etched with worry. This is too big, one of them said. This is bigger than us. We can't just let them in without asking questions. But before they could debate further, a young woman named Amelia stepped forward. She was a teacher in the town, someone who had always believed in the possibility of something more. They've come here to offer us something. A chance to leave this place, to explore the stars. Why would we turn that down? Jacob's eyes hardened as he turned to her. Because not everything that glitters is gold, Amelia. Trusting them could mean the end of everything we know. What if they want to use us? What if they want to take our resources, or worse? Amelia shook her head. We don't know that. All we know is that they're offering us something we never thought possible. Maybe we shouldn't be so quick to reject it." The debate raged on, dividing the town into two factions. One group, led by people like Amelia, was ready to welcome the Zilathians, eager to join the Federation and explore the stars. The other group, led by Jacob and others who shared his mistrust, was determined to stay cautious and wary, unwilling to risk their future on the unknown. As the Zilathians waited patiently, their ship hovering above them, the fate of Landers Edge seemed to hang in the balance. The townspeople were torn between the promise of something extraordinary and the fear of the unknown. The arrival of the Zilathians had changed everything, and no one could say what would come next. But as the stars twinkled above, and the shimmering ship cast a soft glow across the town, one thing was certain: this was only the beginning. The days following the Zilathian arrival were filled with tension and uncertainty. The town of Landers Edge had always been small and tight-knit, but now it seemed as though everyone was choosing sides. The once bustling streets were divided, with one group eager to embrace the aliens and their promises of a new future, and the other determined to keep their distance, fearing the unknown. The first group, those who had approached the Zilathians immediately, were organizing meetings in the town hall. They were filled with excitement, discussing what the Galactic Federation might offer. The more they learned about the Federation, the more they believed it could bring about incredible changes. New technologies, peace among the stars, the opportunity to explore worlds beyond their own. Who could resist such an offer? Amelia, the teacher who had spoken out so passionately during the first meeting, was at the forefront of the movement. She gathered her fellow townsfolk, urging them to be open-minded, to see the Zilathians not as invaders but as potential allies. "We've always lived in the shadow of a dying world," she said in one of her impassioned speeches. "But the Federation could change all of that. We have a chance to step out into the universe, to join something greater than ourselves. We owe it to our children, to the future, to take that leap." Jacob and his group, however, remained firm in their opposition. They were not moved by the promises of space travel or advanced technologies. Their lives had been built on the land, on a way of life that felt secure, even if it was isolating. The idea of joining a galactic federation seemed foreign and dangerous. No one had asked for this. No one had dreamed of becoming part of something so far beyond them. "We don't know these people," Jacob said during one of the many heated debates at the local tavern. "They say they're offering peace, but what if it's a trick? What if they just want to use us for resources or experiment on us? We've seen this kind of thing before. Governments, corporations, always promising the world and taking more than they give. It never ends well." His words resonated with many of the town's older residents, people who had lived through wars, betrayals, and broken promises. They weren't sure if the Zilathians were truly benevolent, or if their true motives were hidden behind that calm exterior. "We've always survived on our own," said Clara, a widow who had worked the mines for most of her life. "We don't need their fancy technology. We're fine here, just the way we are." But Amelia and her supporters were not deterred. They continued to meet with the Zilathians, eager to learn more. They began to understand the Zilathians' offer. Not just an invitation, but a commitment to share knowledge, resources, and technologies that could bring prosperity to their world. The Federation was an organization dedicated to peace and cooperation between different races and species, a chance to bring harmony to the galaxy. The Zilathians, it seemed, were just the first step in this grand vision. As Amelia listened to the Zilathian ambassador, a being named Solon, she found herself captivated. Solon's voice was soothing, his words filled with an elegant certainty that seemed almost perfect. There was a calm assurance in his eyes, a quiet strength that made her believe in the vision of the Federation. "Humanity is ready for a greater purpose," Solon had said, his deep voice resonating in the quiet of the town hall. "Your species has always reached for the stars, but now, you have the opportunity to join us. The Federation can offer you stability, protection, and knowledge. The universe is vast, and there is so much to learn." But Jacob was not convinced. He had seen enough to know that not everything was as it seemed. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Zilathians had an agenda, one that went beyond offering their help. He spent nights alone, thinking, piecing together fragments of old stories from the galaxy. Stories about powerful beings who offered gifts with hidden costs, who promised peace but demanded obedience in return. One night, Jacob gathered a small group of like-minded individuals at the local mining shaft. They huddled together in the shadows, whispering among themselves, their faces grim. "We have to do something," Jacob said quietly. "We can't just let them walk in here, take over our lives, and change everything without knowing what's really at stake." "What do you want to do?" asked Reed, a mechanic who had worked in the mines for years. His voice was thick with concern, but there was also a trace of fear in it. He'd seen too much already, and he didn't want to risk everything they had. Jacob's eyes darkened. "We need to find out who these Zilathians really are. We need to get answers. And if it comes down to it, we need to make sure they can't take our land, our homes, or our independence." The divide in the town was now as deep as a rift in the earth. While Amelia and her supporters worked toward integrating with the Zilathians, to open their world to the possibilities of the Federation, Jacob's group began to work in the shadows. They gathered old maps, studied what little was known about the Federation, and started to make secret plans to investigate the true nature of the Zilathians and their offer. The atmosphere in Landers Edge had changed. It was no longer just a sleepy town under the stars. It was a place of uncertainty, suspicion, and division. Old friendships were strained. Families were torn apart by the different opinions on what was best for the future. And as the days passed, the Zilathians, unaware of the growing dissent among the townsfolk, continued their peaceful outreach. They extended offers of cooperation, promising to help humanity ascend to the next stage of its evolution. But in the shadows, Jacob's group was preparing for something different, something darker. Landers Edge had become ground zero for a conflict that could determine the future of humanity itself. And neither side knew how far the other was willing to go to win. The question was, would the people of Landers Edge be able to resolve their differences before it was too late? Or would the arrival of the Zilathians tear them apart forever? The tension in Landers Edge continued to grow as the days turned into weeks. The town had become a place of whispers, divided loyalties, and a palpable sense of unease. People who had once shared meals and laughter now found themselves avoiding one another, unsure of who was an ally and who might be working against them. The arrival of the Zilathians had brought with it not just a new possibility, but a deep fracture in the heart of the town. Amelia, still hopeful and eager to see the best in the Zilathians, had begun working closely with Solon, the Zilathian ambassador. She was among the first to volunteer to act as a liaison between the two sides, hoping to bridge the widening gap. She had learned much about the Galactic Federation from Solon, how it had been formed millennia ago by different species who had shared knowledge, culture, and technology for the betterment of all. She could sense that the Federation truly wanted to help humanity, to lift them out of isolation and give them a chance to be part of something bigger. But even as she moved forward with her work, a growing unease gnawed at her. She had heard whispers from Jacob's group, their warnings growing more intense as they dug deeper into the Federation's history. They spoke of other planets that had joined the Federation, planets that had thrived for a time, only to lose their independence, their identities, and their freedom. The Federation, they claimed, wasn't as benevolent as it seemed. It was an empire, not a democracy. One evening, as Amelia sat in the small, dimly lit town hall discussing logistics with Solon, she found herself looking out the window at the distant hills where Jacob and his group had taken to meeting. She saw them, just beyond the horizon, huddled together as they had so many times before. There was a fire in their eyes, a fire that she could no longer ignore. "Amelia," Solon's voice broke her reverie. "You are beginning to understand, yes? The stars are waiting for your people. It is your time to join the Federation, to unlock the potential within your species." Amelia nodded, but her heart felt heavy. She could feel the weight of the town's divided spirit pressing on her shoulders. For all her faith in the Zillathians and their offer, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that there was more to the story than they were being told. Solon, she began cautiously, I need to ask you something. Something that's been bothering me. The Zillathian turned his large, reflective eyes toward her, his expression serene. Ask, Amelia. There is nothing you cannot ask. She hesitated. What happens to those who refuse the Federation's offer? Those who don't want to join, who don't want to be part of it? Solon's gaze shifted slightly, as though considering her question carefully. The Federation does not force its will upon anyone, Amelia. But those who resist the unity it offers will eventually find themselves isolated, alone. The Federation is a collective, a shared vision of peace. Those who refuse that vision often find their world becoming smaller, more insular. They lose the chance to be part of something greater. It is not a punishment, but a natural consequence of their choice. Amelia frowned. She understood what Solon was saying. There was no threat in his words, just a cold inevitability. The Federation offered peace, but in that peace, there would be no room for rebellion or dissent. The choice was simple: join or be left behind. Outside, Jacob was growing more vocal in his opposition. His warnings to the people of Landers Edge were no longer whispered in the corners of taverns. They were shouted from the rooftops. He had organized protests, calling for the town to reject the Zillathians and their offer. He spoke to the masses, his voice harsh but filled with an intensity that made people listen. They say it's peace, but it's control, Jacob declared one evening at the town square, standing before a growing crowd. They're offering us the stars, but they want our souls in return. We can't let them take what's ours. We're not a part of some galaxy-wide empire. We are Landers Edge, and we stand alone. His words were met with both cheers and jeers. A handful of townsfolk stood with him, their faces set in grim determination. But others, those who had begun to see the Federation as their salvation, countered his claims with promises of progress and prosperity. The town had become a battleground for ideas, and neither side was willing to yield. As the debates raged on, the Zillathians continued to extend their hand. They offered to help improve the town's infrastructure, to provide advanced medical technology that could cure diseases long thought incurable. They spoke of educational programs that would train the next generation of explorers and diplomats. The Federation was not just about joining an alliance, it was about building a future together. But even as these promises were made, cracks began to show. People began to question the true nature of the Zillathians' gift. Why did they offer such advanced technology so freely? What was the price they expected to be paid? One evening, after a particularly heated meeting with the Zillathians, Jacob and his group made a bold decision. They had uncovered something troubling in their research, a hidden message embedded in the ancient texts of the Federation's founding. A warning from a long-forgotten race that had once been part of the Federation. An account of how their world was slowly drained of its resources, its autonomy stripped away, until nothing was left but the hollow shell of a civilization. Jacob was certain now, the Zillathians were not as benevolent as they appeared. They were part of a larger machine, a system of control, and they had come to Landers Edge to expand that machine. The people of this town weren't just being offered an alliance, they were being targeted for something much worse: assimilation. He gathered his group once more, speaking with urgency. We can't let them take our freedom. We can't let them rewrite our destiny. We need to take action now, before it's too late. But Amelia, still caught between her loyalty to the Zillathians and her love for her town, was torn. She had heard Jacob's warnings, but the vision of a brighter future kept pulling at her heart. Could the Zillathians really be as dangerous as Jacob claimed? Or was the fear of change clouding his judgment? The truth, she realized, was slipping further out of reach. And the town was running out of time. The rift between the two factions was growing deeper, and soon, it would no longer be a matter of words and debates. It would come down to action. And when action was taken, there would be no turning back. The day the decision came was shrouded in a heavy silence. It was as though the very air of Landers Edge had thickened with the weight of all the unspoken fears and divided hopes. The town was no longer the place it had once been. A strange unease had settled over every street, every home. People no longer greeted each other with casual smiles. Instead, they exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether the person standing next to them was a friend or a foe. Amelia stood by her window, gazing out at the hills where Jacob and his followers were known to gather. She had spent countless nights thinking, reflecting on the information they had all gathered. She could hear the arguments echoing in her mind, the promises of the Zilathians and the warnings of Jacob's group. Her heart pulled her in two directions, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of the consequences of this choice. She wanted to believe in the vision that Solon had painted for her, a vision of a future where humanity could stand alongside the stars, a future where Landers Edge was no longer a forgotten, isolated outpost in the universe. The Zilathians had shown her a glimpse of what could be: clean energy, advanced medicine, exploration beyond the confines of their small world. They had offered them everything they had ever dreamed of. But as much as she wanted to believe, doubt crept in. Jacob's warnings, his unyielding conviction, had struck a chord deep inside her. She had seen the unease in the eyes of her neighbors, the fear that had been growing with each passing day. She could no longer ignore the fact that there were too many unanswered questions. One morning, as the town square began to stir with the hustle of daily life, the Zilathians made an announcement. Solon stood at the center of the town, his calm, resonant voice carrying across the crowd as he addressed the people of Landers Edge. "We have heard your concerns," Solon said, his eyes sweeping across the assembled townsfolk. "But time is running short. The Federation cannot wait forever. If you wish to join us, to be part of something greater, the time to act is now. Your world can be transformed. Peace, prosperity, and knowledge will be yours." The crowd was divided as the words hung in the air. Some faces lit up with hope, eager to step into the future, while others remained stony-faced, eyes narrowed with suspicion. The tension between the two sides was palpable, and Amelia could see the rift widening before her eyes. Jacob was there, too. His voice was loud and defiant as he stood at the edge of the crowd, facing the Zilathians. "Don't listen to them," he shouted. "They offer you the stars, but they take everything you hold dear in return. We don't need them. We don't need their peace. We've survived without them, and we can continue to survive without them. They're not offering salvation. They're offering control." Amelia's heart ached as she watched Jacob. She knew him, knew the depth of his fear and mistrust. She understood why he was so adamant, but it was clear that his words were having a deep effect on the crowd. The lines between the two factions were drawn with startling clarity now. In the back of her mind, she could hear Solon's voice, the calm reassurance that had initially given her hope. "We understand your concerns," he had said during their private meetings. "But understand this. There is no going back. The Federation does not wait. To reject this offer is to condemn yourselves to isolation. You will be left behind, and that is not something you can afford." His words echoed now, twisting her thoughts. Was Jacob right, or was Solon's promise the only way forward? Amelia stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "We have to make a choice," she said, her gaze sweeping across the town. "This is bigger than all of us. It's not just about fear or hope. It's about what kind of future we want for ourselves and our children. I believe in the Federation. I believe in what it can offer us. But I also understand why some of you are afraid. This is not an easy decision, and I can't tell you what's right. All I can do is ask you to think about what kind of world we want to build." Jacob's eyes flashed with anger. "What you're asking is for us to surrender," he said harshly. "Surrender our autonomy, our independence. You think they're offering peace, but it's a lie. The Federation takes everything. It swallows up worlds, cultures, people. And when they're done, there's nothing left but conformity and control." Amelia's heart clenched. She wanted to argue, to make him see that they weren't giving up anything, they were gaining everything. But the words stuck in her throat. She knew that there was no easy answer. The Federation was a promise of a future, but Jacob's warnings had made her question the price of that future. The Zillathians had made it clear that the window of opportunity was closing. If the people of Landers Edge didn't make a decision soon, they would be left behind, isolated and cut off from the larger galaxy. But the other side of the coin was that if they did join, they might lose everything they had fought to protect. In the days that followed, a town meeting was called. The entire population of Landers Edge gathered in the town hall, with the Zillathians standing at the back, silently observing. The air was thick with the weight of the decision that lay ahead. Every face in the room was filled with tension, uncertainty, and fear. One by one, the townsfolk began to speak. Some, like Amelia, passionately advocated for joining the Federation, believing that it was the only way forward. Others, like Jacob, warned against giving in to the allure of the unknown, urging everyone to remember their roots and resist the lure of easy promises. As the meeting wore on, it became clear that the town was irrevocably divided. There was no middle ground. Some would choose the stars, others would choose to stay behind. And then, just as it seemed that the conflict could not be resolved, Solon stepped forward. "We will give you time," he said softly, his voice carrying through the room. "But know this, the Federation's invitation is not indefinite. If you do not act soon, you may find that you are too late." His words hung in the air like a quiet threat. The choice, once a hopeful possibility, now felt like an ultimatum. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she turned to look at Jacob. She saw the determination in his eyes, the unwavering belief that his path was the right one. But she also saw the uncertainty in her own reflection. Could she turn her back on the future she had dreamed of? Could she live with the consequences of that choice? The room fell silent as the moment stretched on. The fate of Landers Edge was in their hands now. The choice had been made. The days after the town meeting were suffocating in their silence. A storm was brewing, both in the skies above and within the hearts of the people of Landers Edge. Tensions between the two sides were no longer subtle or diplomatic. They were loud, volatile, and impossible to ignore. It was clear that a tipping point had been reached. A deep fracture had split the town in two, and no one knew what the fallout would look like. Amelia spent her nights grappling with her own doubts. In the safety of her office, the glow of the old desk lamp casting shadows against the walls, she thought of Solon and his promises. She thought of the Zillathians and their hope for a future together, one where the people of Earth would join a greater galactic community. She wanted to believe that this was the answer, that Landers Edge could become something greater than the quiet, isolated settlement it had always been. But as Jacob's words echoed in her mind, it became harder and harder to silence the fear that had crept into her thoughts. Could they truly trust the Zillathians? Would they lose everything, their autonomy, their identity, just to be a part of something bigger? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," she called, her voice weary. It was Elena, one of the young women who had been a staunch supporter of the Federation's offer. Her face was drawn with anxiety, her brow furrowed as she approached. "Amelia, it's getting worse. Jacob's people are organizing," Elena said, her voice tight with fear. "They're gathering supplies, weapons from the old armory, and they've cut off our food shipments from the south. It's not just about words anymore. They're preparing for something." Amelia stood, heart racing. She had known this was coming, but the reality of it felt like a blow to the chest. She had hoped against hope that they could still find a peaceful resolution. But it was clear now that Jacob was no longer interested in talking. He and his followers had made their choice. They weren't going to wait. They were ready for war. "Where are they now?" Amelia asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "They're at the eastern border of town," Elena said. "I've heard they're planning to block any attempts to contact the Zillathians. If they get their way, we'll be completely cut off. No more supplies, no more help." Amelia's mind raced. She couldn't allow this to escalate any further. A town divided by ideological lines was one thing. A town at war with itself was something else entirely. The very future of Landers Edge hung in the balance, and she knew that if she didn't act soon, the town might not survive this conflict. "I have to talk to him," Amelia said, her voice firm. "I have to convince him to stop before it's too late." "Amelia, please be careful," Elena said, her eyes filled with concern. "Jacob's not the man you once knew. He's changed, and his followers, well, they're just as determined." "I know," Amelia replied. "But if we don't try, there's no hope left for us." Jacob's camp was located just outside the town, near the old mines where the town's ancestors had once extracted minerals before the Great Collapse. The wind had picked up, swirling dust and debris in its path as Amelia made her way toward the encampment. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her with every step. This wasn't just about a political choice anymore. It was about the survival of her home, the people she had grown up with, the life they had all built together. As she reached the outskirts of the camp, she saw the familiar faces of Jacob's followers, standing guard and watching her approach. They didn't say a word, their gazes filled with suspicion. Amelia knew what they thought of her now: traitor, collaborator, someone who had sided with the Zillathians. When she finally reached Jacob, he was standing at the center of a small gathering of his closest supporters. His back was to her as she approached, but the moment she stepped into the circle, he turned to face her. "Amelia," Jacob said, his voice cold. "I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you were too busy with your Federation friends." "I came to talk, Jacob," Amelia said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "We don't have to do this. There's still time to stop this madness." Jacob's eyes hardened as he took a step closer to her. "You think you can stop this? You think the Federation is going to give us anything but control? They'll take everything. They'll take our land, our resources, our future. They don't care about us, Amelia. They don't care about our people." "You're wrong," Amelia replied, her voice rising with emotion. "They do care. The Zillathians want to help us. They've offered us a chance to be part of something greater. We can have a future where we don't have to scrape by, where we don't have to fight each other just to survive." Jacob shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "That's the problem, Amelia. You're blinded by their shiny promises. They want to turn us into another cog in their machine. You can't see that, but I do. I've seen it before. Empires, corporations, governments, all the same. They don't care about people. They care about control. And I'll be damned if I let them take us down that path." Amelia felt a pang in her chest as she listened to him. She had never imagined that Jacob would become so radicalized, so entrenched in his beliefs. He was no longer the man who had dreamed of a better world with her. He was someone else now, someone who had become consumed by fear and distrust. "You don't understand," she said quietly, her voice trembling with the weight of the situation. "This isn't about control, it's about survival. We can't keep living in isolation. The world is changing, Jacob. If we don't adapt, we'll be left behind." Jacob's face twisted with anger. "You're the one who doesn't understand. You've already made your choice. And now you want me to follow you down that road. But I won't. I won't let you drag our town into this." "Jacob, please," Amelia pleaded. "If we don't stop now, there will be no going back. You're willing to destroy everything we've worked for, all the good we've built, just to protect some idea of freedom that isn't real. We can work together. We can make this work." But Jacob wasn't listening. His mind was made up. "You've made your choice, Amelia. And now I have to make mine." Before she could say anything more, Jacob turned and gestured to his followers. "Prepare yourselves. We'll do this our way." A sharp fear pierced Amelia's heart. It was happening. There was no turning back now. She watched helplessly as Jacob and his people moved to fortify their position. The barricades were going up. The conflict was no longer a matter of debate or discussion. It had crossed into the realm of violence. Amelia felt a sinking weight in her chest. The Federation would not wait forever. If Jacob and his followers didn't back down, the town would descend into chaos. And with it, all hope for a peaceful future would be lost. That night, Amelia sat alone in her office, staring out the window at the vast horizon. In the distance, the lights of Jacob's encampment flickered, like fireflies in the dark. The decision she had made had led them here. There was no going back now. And soon, the Federation would make its move. Landers Edge was at the edge of a precipice, and the next steps taken would decide whether the town would soar into the stars or crumble under the weight of its divisions. The morning that followed the town meeting was thick with uncertainty. The cold wind still howled over Landers Edge, but it carried with it something far more dangerous, the palpable anticipation of impending conflict. The words of the previous day hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating any hope of reconciliation. The town had spoken. Though the divisions were as sharp as ever, no clear majority had emerged. Some were resolute in their decision to reject the Federation. Others, still clinging to the belief that the Zillathians offered a better future, had backed Amelia. That night, after the meeting, things began to move in the shadows. Jacob's group, growing increasingly organized, more militant in their resistance, had set up camps near the outskirts of town. They were not preparing for a peaceful resolution. They were preparing for war. Amelia had spent hours that evening in her small office in the town hall, reviewing messages from Solon and the Zillathians. They had given their final ultimatum. The Federation would leave if a decision wasn't made within 3 days. The pressure was mounting, but even as Amelia weighed the importance of acting in favor of the Federation, she couldn't ignore the calls for peace from those who had joined Jacob's cause. What had once been a partnership built on shared values was now a battlefield of ideologies. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," she called, her voice low and heavy. It was Elena, one of the younger members of the Federation leaning group, her face drawn with worry. "Amelia, it's getting worse. Jacob and his people. There's talk of taking action. They're not going to wait for the Federation to leave. They're preparing to force us to back down." Amelia stood, tension surging in her chest. "How bad is it? Are they getting violent?" "Not yet," Elena said, her voice trembling, "but they've been gathering weapons from the old armory. They're talking about blockading the town, cutting off supplies. They want to make us surrender." A cold chill swept over Amelia. She had known this could happen. In the depths of her heart, she had feared it would. Jacob had always been strong-willed, unyielding in his convictions. And now that his group had the taste of rebellion, the flames of resistance were hard to extinguish. "Where's Jacob now?" Amelia asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Out near the mines," Elena replied. "He's rallying the others." Amelia's mind raced. She couldn't allow this to escalate further. The town didn't have the resources to withstand a siege, not to mention the physical toll it would take on everyone involved. There had to be another way. She needed to meet with Jacob, to talk to him, to remind him of the world they had both once dreamed of before all of this began. But as she made her way to the door, a familiar voice stopped her. "Amelia, wait." It was Solon. He had arrived quietly, slipping through the hall unnoticed. "They've made their choice," he said, his tone unreadable. "Jacob and his followers will not be swayed. And your people, they will not turn back. The Federation cannot afford to wait any longer." Amelia turned to face him, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had transpired. "Solon, I know. I've tried. But I can't stand by and watch my people tear each other apart. There has to be another way." Solon's eyes softened, but there was no mistaking the urgency in his voice. "You must understand, Amelia. The Federation cannot remain divided. If the people of this world choose war over peace, we will be forced to take action. I do not want that outcome, but it may be unavoidable." "What do you mean?" Amelia asked, fear rising in her chest. Solon hesitated, then spoke with quiet gravity. "If your town becomes a battlefield, we will intervene. We will act in the interests of peace. But that intervention will not be without consequence. You cannot stop the Federation from acting if the situation escalates beyond negotiation. It will not just be your people who suffer. Amelia's pulse quickened. Are you threatening us? I am giving you the truth, Solon said softly. The Federation has no desire to harm anyone. But there is a limit to how much conflict we are willing to allow before we act. This is your final opportunity to avert catastrophe. The next move is yours. With that, Solon turned and left, his silhouette disappearing into the darkness. Amelia stood frozen, the weight of his words sinking deep into her bones. The Federation, for all its promises of peace, would not hesitate to impose its will if things went too far. The choice before her was no longer just about her town. It was about the future of humanity itself. In the hours that followed, the situation grew tense. Jacob's group moved swiftly, securing the borders of the town and cutting off major supply routes. Tensions were high, and the atmosphere was thick with fear and defiance. The people of Landers Edge were divided, but the reality was beginning to sink in. War was now a very real possibility. The days of peaceful debate were over. Amelia couldn't delay any longer. She had to act, and she had to do it fast. With a determined breath, she made her way to the outskirts of town, where Jacob had set up camp near the mines. The wind had picked up, howling over the rugged terrain as she walked through the dry grass, her thoughts racing. When she reached the makeshift barricade, Jacob was there, standing with a group of his closest supporters. His face was grim, hardened by the weight of the decisions he had made. "Jacob," Amelia called, her voice carrying over the wind. He turned to face her, his expression softening for a brief moment when he saw her. "Amelia," he said, his voice low. "I didn't think you'd come. I couldn't stay away," she replied, her voice tight with emotion. "Jacob, this is madness. We're about to tear this town apart. We're about to lose everything we've fought for. You don't understand," Jacob said, his eyes flashing with anger. "The Federation is offering us a future, but it's a future without us in it. We'll lose everything. Our freedom, our way of life, our identity. I can't let that happen." Amelia stepped forward, her heart heavy with regret. "I know you believe that, Jacob. But I believe in the future that the Federation is offering. We can be part of something greater. We don't have to lose ourselves in the process. There's still time to stop this before it's too late." Jacob shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "You don't get it. You've already made your choice. You've already sided with them. And now, I'm going to make sure no one else is fooled." Amelia's heart sank as she realized that no words would change his mind. The divide between them was too deep, the stakes too high. And in that moment, she understood what had to happen next. The Federation, if it was to intervene, would not wait much longer. Time was running out. In a flash of clarity, Amelia knew there was only one path left. The path that would define the future of Landers Edge. The days since the barricades had gone up were long, brutal, and suffocating. Tension hung thick in the air, a weight that pressed down on the people of Landers Edge. The streets, once bustling with life, were eerily quiet. Jacob's camp had fortified its position at the edge of town, while the Federation-leaning group remained inside the heart of the settlement, preparing for what was coming. Supplies dwindled, morale plummeted, and everyone knew that time was running out. Amelia had spent the last few days walking the streets, trying to keep the peace, but the division was unbridgeable. People no longer whispered in hushed tones. They shouted at each other from across the street, their anger and fear boiling over. Friends had become enemies. Families had split down the middle. And in all the chaos, Amelia's heart felt heavier with each passing moment. She had made her decision. She had done everything she could to bridge the gap, to show her people that peace was possible. But now, with the Federation's ultimatum hanging over her, she understood that her efforts were no longer enough. Something had to give. Amelia stood at the window of her office late one night, watching the flickering lights of the two camps. Her heart ached as she saw the armed figures move between the makeshift barricades. It had come down to this. The town had reached its breaking point. A sudden knock at the door snapped her from her thoughts. She turned to find Solon standing in the doorway, his expression serious, almost sorrowful. "Amelia," he said, his voice low. "It's time. The Federation can't wait any longer." Amelia's stomach twisted at his words. She had known this moment would come. The Federation had offered humanity a chance to join something greater, but it had also warned that it would not wait forever. The people of Landers Edge had to decide, peace or war. And now, it was clear that the Federation's patience had run out. "Solon, are they ready to act?" she asked, her voice shaking. "We have no choice. The town is divided beyond repair. If we don't intervene soon, the conflict will only escalate. And if it does, there will be no going back. Tell me, what will the Federation do if we don't choose peace?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Solon's eyes softened, but there was no mistaking the gravity of his words. "If the conflict continues, the Federation will act to protect its interests, and the interests of humanity. We will intervene to stop the fighting. But the cost, Amelia, the cost will be high. The Zilathians cannot remain passive in the face of escalating violence." Amelia turned away, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. She had always known that this decision would have consequences. She had always known that one way or another, this town, her town, would change. But now that the choice was in front of her, she felt the weight of it all. She thought of Jacob, of his passion and his conviction. She thought of the way the people of Landers Edge had once been united, working together to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world. And now, all of that was in jeopardy. "If we surrender," she said slowly, "if we accept the Federation's offer, we will never be the same. We'll be part of something larger, yes, but we'll lose our independence. We'll lose the very thing that makes us who we are." Solon nodded, understanding her fears. "I know, but without the Federation's help, you risk losing everything, your people, your land, your future. The choice is between accepting the inevitable change or fighting and risking extinction. The Federation offers an opportunity, but it's not a simple one." Amelia felt the weight of his words pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. She had thought she was ready for this moment. She had believed that peace could still be found. But the longer she stood there, the more she realized that the decision wasn't about what was best for the town, or even what was best for humanity. It was about what was left to believe in. Her mind flashed back to the first time she had met Jacob. They had been so young, so full of dreams. Back then, the future had seemed limitless. Together, they had imagined a world where they could shape their own destiny, where they would never have to bow to any higher power. But now, Jacob had become a man who was unwilling to bend, a man who believed that any change was an affront to everything they had worked for. She thought of the Federation's offer, of the promise it held, but also the shadow of fear it cast. Could they really build a better world, or would it all fall apart under the weight of their ambitions? Finally, Amelia turned back to Solon, her decision clear in her heart. "Go back to the Federation," she said, her voice firm, though tinged with sorrow. Tell them we will join. But we need more time. We need time to let the people of this town understand that this isn't the end, it's the beginning of something new." Solon's eyes softened with gratitude, but the weight of the moment lingered. "You understand what this means, Amelia. If the people refuse to accept the Federation's terms." "I know," she whispered. "I know." As Solon left, the weight of the decision pressed down even harder. She had chosen the Federation. She had chosen peace, but in doing so, she had condemned a part of her town to forever be lost to the past, to the old ways of thinking that had divided them in the first place. Would Jacob ever forgive her? Would anyone ever see her choice as anything other than a betrayal? The morning dawned cold and quiet, but there was a tension in the air that spoke of a coming storm. Amelia gathered her people together in the town square, knowing that today would change everything. Standing before them, she could see the divided faces, those who had supported her from the beginning, and those who had stood by Jacob. They were looking for something, anything, to hold on to. And so, she spoke. We've reached a crossroads, Landers Edge, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. The future is before us, but it's not the future we imagine. It's a future we must build together. The Federation has offered us a place among the stars. We can be part of something greater than we ever dreamed. But this means change. It means sacrifice. We cannot keep holding on to the past if we want to survive. The choice is now ours. Jacob stood at the edge of the crowd, his face twisted with disbelief and anger. Amelia, you can't do this, he shouted. You can't sell out the future of our town to these invaders. Jacob, Amelia said softly, her voice breaking through the tension. This isn't about them. It's about us. It's about what we want to become. He shook his head, his voice growing louder. I will never accept this. Never. The crowd was growing restless, whispers spreading like wildfire. Amelia's heart raced. She knew that if they didn't act now, the situation would only escalate. She looked toward Solon, who stood by her side, waiting for the signal. With one final glance at Jacob, Amelia made the hardest decision of her life. The Federation will stay, she said, her voice resolute, but only if we can move forward together. We must find a way to heal this rift, or we will all lose. The crowd fell silent. For the first time in days, there was a glimmer of hope.